Fantasy writers spend enormous amounts of time creating elaborate festivals, specific types of clothing, unique foods, invented languages, ancient rituals, beautiful architecture, and yet many cultures inside fantasy worlds still feel strangely thin. Not because the writer lacks imagination, but because the culture isn't functioning structurally. It exists as scenery, not as a force, and readers can feel that difference almost immediately. Welcome to the Mythic Observatory. Today, we are talking about why some fantasy cultures feel alive and why others feel interchangeable. And please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment so others can find this material as well. So, the real problem with most fantasy cultures. So many fantasy writers don't struggle to create culture. We have fantastic imaginations. What we struggle with sometimes is how to make it matter. See, a world may contain richly described traditions and ceremonies and aesthetics, but clothing, food, architecture, and language are not culture itself. They are simply the outputs of culture, symptoms. Culture is actually a behavioral system. It determines what people value, what they fear, what they refuse to do, what they are willing to sacrifice, and what society rewards, what society punishes. Most importantly, culture creates pressure. It behaves almost like a character inside the story. It wants things, it resists things, it enforces things. And if culture in your story does not pressure your characters, then it's mostly just decoration. Decorative culture can make the world feel interesting, but structural culture shapes the story itself. Consider the question, what happens if a character violates their culture? The answer is nothing happens. Then the culture is not functioning structurally. See, in a structurally imagined culture, clothing can signal status or restriction, rituals can reinforce power, language controls what may or may not be spoken, traditions shape behavior, social rules create consequences. Culture stops being scenery and instead it's a system, a living force acting on the narrative itself. To give some examples, one of the reasons that Lord of the Rings feels so alive is because Tolkien understood structural culture. The Shire isn't just cozy, it pressures behavior. Hobbits value routine, comfort, predictability, quiet living. Adventure is culturally viewed as strange. We see this in how the Tooks and the Brandybucks are viewed and talked about. They are whispered about as odd, unnatural. They ride boats. They go into the old forest. They are not respectable. See, Bilbo himself is viewed as someone who has cracked after his adventure. We see that in Lord of the Rings at the very beginning. And this culture gives a tremendous weight to when Frodo actually leaves the Shire. See, the adventure is not only physically dangerous, it's culturally transgressive. Frodo is stepping outside what his society has deemed respectable. It's a weight upon him. Now, compare this with Rohan, which is built on loyalty, honor, martial identity, duty, because those values are embedded into the culture. They create natural tension. Amer's conflict works because he must choose between loyalty to his king and loyalty to what Rohan itself is supposed to represent. Eowyn's arc, and I think she's my favorite character in the story, But her arc becomes even stronger because she is simultaneously inspired and also trapped by her culture. She possesses the same warrior spirit as her brother, but her society denies her the ability to express it openly. That cultural restriction creates pressure powerful enough to drive her entire storyline. The Hunger Games also presents excellent example when it comes to culture. The games themselves are not merely a plot device. They are a culture mechanism. The capital has normalized spectacle driven violence. Its culture creates emotional insulation through abundance and entertainment and othering. And if you don't understand what othering is, it is that way of making humans over there, they're not quite human. Meanwhile, the districts are operating under a culture that's shaped by scarcity, labor, fear, survival, and quiet resistance. Those cultural systems shape every decision that these characters make. You can ask questions like, why do families dress their children in their best and carefully for reaping day? Well, it's because appearance can shape sponsorship, which gives them a greater chance of survival. Why is volunteering shocking? Well, not in section one and section two, but it's because the culture has normalized helplessness. Why does Katniss honoring Rue become so revolutionary? Because it violates the emotional rules of the capital system. It humanizes what the capital culture has carefully dehumanized, needs to dehumanize, and that transforms a personal action into political defiance. See, when culture functions structurally, something fascinating happens inside the reader's mind. They begin to predict consequences. They can do this even in a world they have never stepped foot in before. For example, imagine a city where speaking the ruler's name out loud, his true name, is forbidden because it is seen and believed as to hold power. Now imagine that you have a character that's walking down the street and they're angry and they're whispering the true name of the ruler. The reader is instantly thinking, oh my goodness, who's around? And are they going to keep their mouth shut? They can anticipate what the punishment's going to be if you've shown consequence before this. But even if you haven't, there's going to be questions that are going to be circling in that reader's mind. Okay. Especially if you've already set it up that speaking the ruler's name, true name out is viewed as almost attempted assassination or is viewed as attempted assassination. Okay, so why does flat culture weaken a story? A flat culture, one that's not done structurally, it doesn't just weaken the world building, it weakens that narrative pressure because that pressure comes from the conflict between what a character wants and what their world demands. The culture is what tells people what is honorable, what is shameful, what is acceptable, what and who deserves power, what love looks like, what sacrifice means, and what someone is willing to die for. It is the primary force that shapes how a person thinks, how they react, what they value, what they fear, how they interpret the world. And without it, characters are pretty much default to modern generalized behavior patterns. They may have different names and appearances and occupations, but emotionally and morally, they respond pretty much all the same way. They want the same things, they argue the same way, they hold the same assumptions. And if they don't, why? Why is that? They're making decisions using the same internal logic because their world's not pressuring them whatsoever. Take this example. A prince from a militant empire easily could emotionally sound identical to the village thief, or a desert priest probably would react to death the same way as a northern mercenary would. Or, gasp, a fairy queen speaks the same world view as a modern college student. These characters are not products of their world. They're simply actors who are wearing a different costume. However, strong culture differentiates people. It shows the reason why different peoples react differently. It helps to set up friction very organically, and it's not just because of plot mechanisms. You have things opening up organically. Moral collisions, political instabilities, personal identity crises appear simply because culture is not wallpaper. It is an invisible force pushing against every major decision, everyone in the story. Strong culture in your story also helps with your theme because themes emerge from value systems under pressure. Consider themes like duty versus desire, freedom versus control, survival versus morality. Strong culture forces value systems to collide. It allows readers to see abstract concepts inside that are lived within systems. It gives us a chance of being able to explore really deep thoughts and deep values. This is why story is so powerful. It can change hearts and minds, it can change paradigms, it can allow people to expand how they see the world. So, what do you do if your culture is not structural in your story right now? The answer is not adding more detail. Instead, it's changing how your culture is functioning within your story. I would suggest starting by asking questions like, what does this society reward? What does it punish? What behavior ensures survival? What behavior threatens stability? What benefits the system? Who suffers beneath it? What beliefs become normalized after generations? The histories, the backstories of your world should be affecting what the culture is. And then what you want to do is that you want to then tie those answers directly into your plot mechanisms, into your character decisions, into the conflict, into the consequences. And definitely consider allowing cultures to contain contradictions. We see this in our own everyday world because culture is rarely internally consistent. You may have a society that values honor and survival simultaneously, truth and loyalty simultaneously, freedom and order simultaneously. And can you see what could happen when characters are forced between choosing between these two competing ideals? Finally, strong cultures adapt, fracture, radicalize, double down, but they never remain static because living systems respond to stress. So, in the end, culture is not an accessory to fantasy, it is one of the engines that drive it. It's what helps characters feel anchored into a real world, how they feel anchored into conflict that gains depth, for themes to gain weight, for consequences to feel inevitable, and the world stops feeling like scenery. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if this sparked something for you, please consider visiting my Substacks for my companion essays on culture. The links are down below, and until next time, may your steel be tempered, your roots unbroken, and your path rise to meet you.